So, at the beginning of the year, some people heard whisperings, the warnings of an incoming recession, or even the warnings of an incoming global recession, and they got louder and louder every day, day by day. There was a survey released by Switzerland-based World Economic Forum. 7 out of 10 respondents in a sample of 22 leading private and public sector economists said they believed a global recession was at least somewhat likely in 2023. Now, meanwhile, Ned Davis Research, which they're a Florida-based research firm that, they're known for global recession probability model they have. They raised the likelihood of a global recession next year to 98.1%. That's the highest since the COVID pandemic related downturn of 2020 and the global financial crisis of 2008. We've also got to think about while the war in Ukraine, China's, pandemic policies and runaway inflation are all clouding the economic outlook, investors are actually particularly concerned about the prospects of the US Federal Reserve raising interest rates just so aggressively that the world's largest economy tips into recession, taking much of the rest of the world with it. Now, historically, the US and other central banks have found it difficult to manage the task of raising rates, which raising the cost of borrowing and investing for businesses and households without dealing a severe blow to economic growth. Past recessions, which are usually defined as 2 consecutive quarters of negative growth, have been blamed on the Fed's effort to cool those high inflations, right? Including back-to-back downturns in the 1980s. Critics, including renowned economists like Jeremy Siegel, have accused the U.S. Fed this time around of waiting too long to begin raising rates, only to resort to drastic heights, to make up for the inaction that they previously had. They waited too long. Now, despite holding out hope for a soft landing for the economy, U.S. Fed Chair Jerome Powell acknowledged here recently that central bank officials don't know. I mean, they just don't know whether their efforts to rein in inflation will lead to a recession or how severe a recession would even be. And think about it. They don't know. So here's a quote for you. This is from Powell Lin, an assistant professor of economics at George Washington University. He said, "For the U.S., if inflation does not show signs of cooling in the last few months of 2022 and measures of inflation expectations start to climb, it would force the Federal Reserve to continue with aggressive rate hikes beyond 2022 into the spring of 2023. In his opinion, that's when the economy will tip into a recession." Right? He says, "I think a similar situation would apply to other countries as well. If central banks are forced to increase rates aggressively and persistently, either to whether it's to defend their currency or to tame inflation, he thinks a recession is inevitable. Inevitable." Another professor, his name is Campbell Harvey, right? He's a professor at Duke University School of Business who pioneered the use of U.S. bond market yields to predict recessions, said the Fed's actions could easily push the economy into recession, and a recession would be a very effective in reducing inflation, right? However, recessions are very painful. No one wants to be laid off or be forced to collect government assistance for a prolonged period of time, right? However, Harvey said, however, that the yield curve indicator he has used to predict the last 8 recessions did not indicate an imminent downturn, as the curve has yet to invert for a full quarter. Well, we're talking global here, so we can't just talk about the U.S. We need to talk about risks in Europe and Asia. Well, outside the U.S., economic headwinds, they don't really offer much optimism, right? Germany, Italy, and the UK, 3 of Europe's largest economies, are expected to undergo lengthy recessions next year, largely due to the energy supply issues caused by, Russia's invasion of Ukraine, right? The Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development is who said this recently, right? Now, that that group, that organization expects the eurozone to grow just 0.3% in 2023, indicating that many of the bloc's economies will be in recession throughout periods of the year. Now, while the Asia Pacific is expected to avoid contraction, this is China's zero COVID lockdowns and border restrictions, they're really becoming like a serious drag on their growth potential. Here recently, the World Bank slashed its economic forecast for the Asia Pacific to 3.2%, down from 5% in April, and nearly halved its forecast for China to 2.8. A senior economist for emerging Asia at Natixis in Hong Kong, Trine Nguyen, said Asian economies would not be spared from the fallout of rising interest rates, although the region was looking at a slowdown, not a meltdown. We think Asian growth will decelerate. For economies more exposed to the trade cycle, the impact of weakening external demand will feel worse, such as South Korea and Taiwan. Right? That's what this economist said. Now, in emerging Asia, excluding China, the tightening of financial conditions will push down investment. Consumption is expected to decelerate, but remain sticky as they are mostly essentials in emerging Asia, excluding China. Now, Harvey, that Duke professor, said that although he had much more confidence that Europe would spend 2023 in recession than the US, the world's facing a precarious economic outlook. I mean, inflation is a global phenomenon. Inflation surges are often associated with recessions. Yes, if the US goes into recession, it would likely lead to a global recession, especially given that Europe is likely already in a recession. So it really comes down to a lot of people think that if the US goes into recession, the rest of the world goes into recession. And a lot of people are saying that parts of the other world are already in a recession. So if the US does go into recession, it would make it that much more worse for the rest of the world. So it seems across the board, it seems like most people are fairly certain recession's coming. So the best thing you can do is read up on how to protect yourself, how to get ahead of this, and what you need to do to be ready to weather the storm, right? So do a little research and figure out what's best for you. Again, what's best for me is not best for you. So you need to find out what's best for you. Hopefully, this is going to get you guys in the go mode, right? Ready to take care of yourself, protect yourself. But from right here, I hope you guys liked the video. Hope it got you thinking. If you did, hit that thumbs up button. If you're not subscribed to the channel, I'd really appreciate it if you did. But till I see you guys in the next one, y'all be safe.